All right, if we're ready to go, then I'd like to call the meeting to order. This is the meeting of the Governing Committee of the King County Regional Homeless Authority for Monday, November 6th, 2023. Today's meeting is being held virtually and in person. I want to thank Mayor Harrell and the Seattle City Council for hosting today's in-person part of the meeting at Seattle City Hall. We're still waiting for folks to arrive, but Austin, if you could please go ahead and call the roll. We'll see how close we are to having a quorum.
People are joining on in. Chair Constantine.
Here.
Member McDermott.
Here.
Member Balducci. Member Salcedo. Member McWhorter Jr.
Here.
Member Burney.
Here.
Member Prince. Member Backus.
Here.
Member Lewis.
Present.
Member Harrell.
Here.
Member Herbold. Member Herbold.
She's here. I see her.
I see her.
She's on mute.
Yeah.
Is she
And
wave your hand there, Councilman.
Member Green.
Here.
Member Balducci. Member Salcedo.
Here. Councilmember Balducci's in the attendees.
Councilmember Balducci.
Yep, just got here.
Hi, awesome. Well, Chair, we have quorum.
All right, we'll start by grounding our work in our theory of change, which is if we create a homeless response system that centers people with lived experience, then we will be able to focus on responding to needs and eliminating inequities in order to end homelessness for all. We also acknowledge that King County is located on the unceded traditional land of Coast Salish peoples. We honor this land and its people past and present, and we are committed to supporting organizations led by and in support of Native and Indigenous people. At every meeting, we reserve time for public comment. If you'd like to provide comment, please raise your hand in Zoom now or sign up with Austin in person, and Austin will call on you in the order received after the CEO update. We have a consent agenda. Our consent agenda is the approval of the minutes from our July 2023 Governing Committee meeting. The chair would entertain a motion to approve those minutes as presented.
McDermott, so moved.
It's been moved.
Backus, I will second.
Been moved and seconded. Are there any additions or corrections to the minutes of the July 2023 meeting? Hearing none, all those in favor of approving the minutes, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Those opposed say no. The minutes, being the entire consent agenda, are approved. CEO, we'll now move to update from the authority's CEO, Helen Howell. Helen, please go ahead.
Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. It's nice to see all of you. I am happy to report that we're making good progress on our top priorities of improving the internal workings of the agency. And I'm confident that we will be able to set the next CEO up for success. With regard to the CEO search, I had a chance to meet with the search firm a few weeks ago. They've started their listening sessions with members of the KCRHA team and our community to gather information on what qualifications and experience would be best suited to this position. We expect to have a more thorough update on the timeline at the next convening of the advisory committee. Also, I really want to thank all of the advisory committee members for their engagement. their work is critical to ensure the long-term success of the authority. I also like to talk a little bit, update you on our first severe weather activation. Was the weekend of October 27th through 29th in response to overnight freezing temperatures. We partnered successfully with the Urban League, Salvation Army, and the YWCA to provide shelter for 69 homeless single adult men and women, as well as 24 families. Highlights to the joint response included the Salvation Army expanding its capacity at the Soto shelter by adding 30 beds during that activation period. They served 60 individuals there over the course of those 3 days. The Urban League staff assisted with the West Seattle cold weather shelter, which 31 participants utilized. And the YWCA received 24 referrals from the Mary's Place intake line. It was a good opportunity to check our protocols and refine how we work before we run into a bigger winter storm. Also, as we head into winter, we're engaged in planning for the unsheltered point in time count to be conducted at the end of January. The count will use the same respondent-driven sampling methodology that we used in 2022, but it will be focused just on the questions required by HUD, and we will not be including any additional qualitative information or data. Our data team will be briefing the implementation board about the pit count planning in more detail this Wednesday, and we'll be briefing you, the GC members, in your upcoming caucus meetings. And of course, we'll keep you updated as we get closer to the actual count in January. I also want to take a moment to address questions around the large number of asylum seekers at Riverton Park Church in Tukwila. As you may know, many of these asylum seekers are families with children, and right now, most of them are living outside. KCRHA staff have visited the church to assess the situation and so that we're well positioned to make appropriate recommendations. We're working with the government partners at all levels, the state and the county, to seek a solution. And the state is now leading this effort. As bridges to a longer term solution, KCRHA has offered expertise on rapid rehousing, including guidance on cost modeling based on local expertise and program costs, as well as some coordination to assist with weatherization of the tents. As we hear of additional needs from partners, we'll be sure to keep our governing boards updated and ensure that we're being responsive, but also playing an appropriate role. We recognize that the homeless response system is already stretched thin and that there's a need for both a state and federal solution. The authority sees our role as one of support and expertise as a bridge to a longer term strategy developed by and implemented by the state and the other systems responsible for this asylum seeking population. I'd note, however, that the call for humanitarian aid and the challenge of finding safer shelter and housing for approximately 300 new people really highlights the need for regional collaboration across cities, as well as collaboration with federal and state partners. I guess I will also mention that our federal partners and being strong supporters of KCRHA, we welcomed HUD Deputy Assistant Secretary Jameen Bryan for a visit on Tuesday, October 24th, and had a chance to talk through some of our progress and challenges as a young agency. And as always, appreciated the opportunity to speak directly and frankly with her. And actually, I think that's it for the updates that I have for you right now. I am looking forward to meeting with you again later this year to approve our 2024 budget.
Thank you. Do any members have questions or comments for Helen? I see Lisa Herbold has her hand up.
Thanks so much. I just wanted to thank everybody who helped make possible the staffing at the West Seattle Legion location. We've I think made a compelling case for the need for geographically focused winter response shelters, not just downtown. And the authority has responded to the call for that. And the fact that there were over 30 people there last week certainly shows that the need is great. And just really want to thank everybody on behalf of Keith for making it possible to sort of surge the staffing there to assist him.
Thank you. Others? All right, thanks to the CEO for your report. We now have time for public comment up to 15 minutes. If you wish to comment and have not already done so, please raise your hand in Zoom or sign up in person at Seattle City Hall. Each person will have 1 minute to comment. We will start with members of the public on Zoom and then move to individuals who are in the room in person if there are any. Austin, please go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Taj, for sharing your screen. First up, we have is Jaja Floyd. Jaja, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to test your mic, after the test, your 1 minute will begin when you speak.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Jaja.
Okay, thank you. Yes, I want to speak to, first of all, I want to speak to the 1 minute rule here as far as giving testimony, right? I think at least it would take 2 to 3 minutes for people to get out what they need to say. And another thing is I want to thank you for the severe weather shelters, Helen, and that is much needed. And I was so glad that they went into effect as quick as they did. And I also want to talk about my confirmation onto the implementation board as a seated member. And I would just appreciate that you take the time to think about moving me forward. I am passionate about it. I have been on with the implementation board up until I wasn't. So for a long time, as Juanita spotted out, Elk's backup. Thank you.
Thank you, Jaja. Next up, we have is Bill Curlin-Hackett. Bill, I'm giving you permission to speak if you want to test your mic.
And if I could just interject, I hear Jaja's plea about the time limits, and that I think was adopted when we had an overwhelming number of people trying to testify. So in the future, we should consider adjusting the time up or down from 2 minutes to 1 minute, depending on how many people we have signed up to testify. Bill, go ahead.
Am I unmuted?
Yes, you are unmuted.
Okay, thank you. In June this year, I made a Seattle Public Records request of vehicle impounds between January to May, and I found 1,441 RVs, campers, detached trailers, and buses lived in. Impound reasons included 72-hour violations, expired tabs, prohibited area, and others. This reveals to me harmful control on the streets, severely compromising outreach. In 10 years of the former scofflaw mitigation program, impounds from tickets were under 5. Further shelter was not offered to these 1,441 vehicles since they are considered violations of law, and I believe this constituted a violation of Martin versus Boise. The unilateral enforcement of law conflicts with ending homelessness through pathways to stability. Also under Seattle's Unified Care Team sweeps, shelter offered fails if a couple, if it's pets, if there's children, if they're trans, and so on, since shelter spaces are almost all for singles. I ask you, Mayor Harrell, if you'll meet with the Vehicle Residency Outreach Group of the KCRHA on how we can do something better to mitigate this harm and create better pathways.
Thank you, Bill. Next up we have is Harold. Harold, I've given you permission to talk in the Zoom. If you want to test your mic, unmute, test your mic, and then give your testimony.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can, Harold.
Thank you for letting us have this short amount of time. I do wish we had 2 minutes to speak. I come to the committee as a former system advocate to speak about how we were let go, why we were let go, and we have not received an answer. We did an enormous amount of work in 11 months in housing, the row clients right of way, plus the other clients that we were sent to throughout the city. Some of you can attest to that because I do have a work ethic, and most of you here have seen that. But we are labeled as not proficient, not efficient. We are more than efficient in 11 months, over 500 people housed. We had a hostile work environment, and we had people who just didn't respect us. The theory of change, as you started this meeting with, is not being used at the KCRHA as it should be. No one is in charge of making sure its theory of change is going on. I asked this committee to look into how and why
Thank
the
you,
system
John.
advocates were let go.
Thank you, Harold. Next up we have is Hallie. Hallie, if you can unmute, you've been given permission to test your mic, and then your 1 minute will start after you speak.
Awesome. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Great. Thanks, Austin. Good afternoon, governing committee members. It's good to see you again. My name is Hallie Willis, and I'm the Community Policy Manager for the Seattle-King County Coalition on Homelessness. An operational work plan for the 5-year plan is a good next step, but to accomplish its goals, the KCRHA needs to ensure that contracts cover the full cost of providing services, keep up with inflation, and address years of suppressed wages. We're happy that Seattle requires an inflation adjustment and that the mayor added a 2% wage increase for many homelessness services providers this year. But we need those increases to apply to all homelessness services across the county if we're going to have a truly regional response. We need these critical investments just to continue services at their current capacity, even though we need to add much more good quality services and shelter. As you consider KCRHA's budget next month, please prioritize these critical investments for the entire homelessness response system. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up we have is Michelle Eastman. Michelle, you've been given permission to speak in the Zoom. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and your 1 minute will start after that.
All right, can you hear me now?
I can, Michelle. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So good afternoon, council members. My name is Michelle Eastman. I am the director of communications at the Lived Experience Coalition. And I just wanted to let you know that I'm here to support Jaja Floyd and Marvin Futrell as implementation board, being confirmed onto the implementation board as members and alternates respectively. And they are both capable leaders. And it is important to ensure that the Lived Experience Coalition maintain its seats as members of the constituency of unhoused community members. So thank you, sir, very much.
Thank you, Michelle. Next up we have is Yaz. Yes, you were just given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and you have 1 minute.
Okay, yes, my name's Yasmin Wahid. I wasn't able to change it going in here. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay. I'm here to speak on applying the racial equity lens for the impacted communities and having things appropriately documented. For example, as a woman of color, I've experienced many barriers to housing when it comes to affordability and different things like that. And I'm only in the housing I have now because I am a commercial sexual exploitation survivor. And as a participant of the Seattle Organization of Prostitution Survivors, I feel like we need to implement more programs. They just started a new program that they're partnering with Safe Stays, and it gets credits for survivors. I feel that we need to include the community of those in prostitution, engaging in survival sex, and escaping human trafficking when considering obtaining the unique barriers that they face in getting affordable, safe housing. There's many barriers to that, but I feel like this community is underrepresented, and we need to have more people take into consideration the unique barriers that they experience trying to escape human trafficking, sex trafficking. So thank you for letting me share.
Thank you. Next up is Jade. Jade, you are given permission to speak in the Zoom. If you want to unmute, test your mic, then your 1 minute will start after your test.
Okay, thank you. Can you hear me?
I can, Jade.
Okay, thank you. Good afternoon. My name is Jade Weiss, and I'm a proud member of the Lived Experience Coalition. I'm also a former KCRHA employee, and actually I was the first one hired after the CEO, so I'm excited to be back in this space. First, I'm here to request that public comment be at least 2 minutes, as 1 minute is not sufficient for substantive arguments and statements. I'd also like to speak in support of the confirmation of Jaja Floyd and Marvin Futrell III to the governance committee and an alternative to the IP. They are not only deeply empathetic and kind human beings, but they have expert knowledge on tangible solutions to end homelessness. Lastly, I urge the governance committee to make a unified regional homelessness authority statement and demonstrate supporting actions that support housing as a human right by acknowledging that it is also more than just a quote need. The KCRHA has a moral obligation and a fiscal responsibility to adopt the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which recognize adequate housing as a part of the right to adequate housing
Thank you,
standard
Jade.
of
You're 1
living
minute.
in 1948. Thank you.
Next up is Elizabeth. Elizabeth, you were just given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic, and then your 1 minute will start after that. Elizabeth, if you'd like to unmute, showing that you are muted.
Sorry, I had trouble unmuting.
Oh, no worries. And we can hear you, so your minute starts whenever you can.
Thank you. I would like to second what was said by Zaza Floyd, by Bill Curlin Hackett, by Harold Odom, Michelle Eastman, Yaz, and Jade. These are all important issues. And it really does matter to have 3 to 5 minutes if you're going to have a well-reasoned argument about something. It really is important to be consistent with your values and to have people with lived experience there. As you say, they are the ones closest to the problem, and they're the ones most likely to have some really good ideas on how to effectively house people and end homelessness. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you give us more time next time. Thank you.
Thank you, Elizabeth. Next up we have is Zanita Reed. Zanita, you have been given permission to talk. If you want to unmute, test your mic. Your 1 minute will start after your test.
Yeah, can you hear me? It's Zanita. Yeah, it's Zanita McWhorter now. My name is Zanita McWhorter. I am a former KCRHA employee, one of the first co-directors. And what I want to say is, despite the challenges that we faced, we permanently housed over 500 people, if we want to talk about helping out with the LEC things and those. When my team came in to do something different in the system, which was really came in to do navigation and stability. It was not to do outreach. And as we did all of those things, we still successfully did it. And what doesn't make sense is how we were only given 2.5 weeks to know that we needed to find something else, even after all of the success of the folks that we housed. We came in for quality, not quantity, and to sit at tables, and to tell the stories of the amazing stuff that's going on, and to hear that's not high level enough. The system is backwards. It should be about people, and that's the theory of change.
Thank you, Zanita. Adam Rice, you've been given permission to speak. If you want to unmute, test your mic. Your 1 minute will start after your test.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can, Adam.
Wonderful. I would like to second what Zanita said. Look, anything between KCRHA and us at this point is probably going to have to be worked out in civil court, unfortunately. What we're worried about are our people. Now, our road clients are having their rapid rehousing extended. We want this extended to our Partnership for Zero clients, as they are now facing a service dearth. only keeping 5 people directly working with these clients is doing them a disservice. We need their housing extended. We need KCRHA to be responsible for these people that they told that they would help function back into society and to honor the theory of change. And I also second Jaja and Marvin's nomination to the implementation board, because we actually need voices who know what's happening. Thank you.
Thank you, Adam. Chair, that is all we have signed up for both in person here in Seattle and in Zoom. We had 10 people give public comment today.
I should turn on my microphone first. Thank you, and thanks to everyone for public comment today. We have resolutions 2023-16 and 2023-17 to consider. I want to thank those who have offered their services and their participation. The 2 resolutions presented by the clerk of the authority would confirm the nomination of Jaja Floyd to the implementation board and Marvin Futrell as an alternate representing lived experience. I would entertain a motion to approve resolution 2023-16 regarding Jaja Floyd.
So moved.
Second.
Yeah.
Okay, so I believe that was member Bernie on the motion and Herbold on the second. Is that right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. The resolution is approved. Then the next is the resolution to approve Marvin Futrell as an alternate. It's 2023-17, and I would entertain a motion to approve this resolution.
I so move.
So Roosevelt McWhorter has moved it, and who seconded it?
Lamont.
Lamont has seconded it. Discussion. All those in favor say aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
And those opposed say no. Resolution 2023-17 is approved. And again, thank you to both of them for their service. We then have resolution 2023-04. This was introduced by member Andrew Lewis. Member Lewis, would you like to make a motion to approve resolution 2023-04 and then take a moment to describe it to the members?
Yes, Mr. Chairman, thank you. I do so move.
And I'll second that.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Please go ahead, Andrew.
Thank you so much, Executive Constantine. For the last several months, we've been discussing this resolution as a board around having an operational work plan for the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. I do think that this is an appropriate next step, given the investment that is being made by the county, the city of Seattle, and other participating jurisdictions in the services and caseload of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and in line with the responsibilities of this board to provide some level of oversight and performance metrics for that work being conducted for transparency with the public, and also to guide future budget and strategic decisions on the part of the entities involved in the King County Regional Homelessness Authority to increase and expand the efficiency and effectiveness of our work. I do have a couple of amendments that I want to bring forward, but just to give an overview of the 3 sections of this resolution very briefly. Section 1 deals with establishing an expectation that a work plan be formed with key goals, deliverables, and metrics by the executive leadership of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority, and that work plan be presented here to the governing board and to the implementation board for additional feedback and consideration. Section 2 sets the expectation of when an initial plan be presented to give feedback. And I do have some amendments pertaining to that section to make it a little bit more flexible. And then section 3 regards quarterly reporting on the progress of the work plan to make sure that the board can stay well informed for emergent developments and track the progress of the authority in these areas that it's charged with. So that is a brief overview. I'm happy to answer questions regarding the plan. I do think while we are engaged in several additional efforts around the recruitment of a new CEO, as well as the group that'll be reporting back on some general areas for reform of the structure or the practices of the King County Regional Homelessness Authority. Work is currently ongoing. As we just heard from Executive Howell, there is a significant amount of money that the authority is issuing in contracts to providers. There is hiring of additional staff for the authority to carry out their work. And I don't think that a structured work plan is something that should wait until a new CEO is in place or until we commit to making some of these structural changes. I think as long as work is ongoing, there should be a more organized operational work plan to go along with it, and for us to track how that work is being conducted and do it in a transparent way. So with that, I'm happy to answer additional questions. I do have some amendments that clarify or that rather change the when we expect to have a draft of the January work plan, and I can move that amendment at the leisure of the chair.
So first, Member Lewis has offered to entertain questions. So this is discussion. You can either opine or you can ask, either one, but go ahead. Anyone has something to say? TikTok. Well, tell us about your First Amendment.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The First Amendment would be to strike the passage in Section 2A that reads, quote, "The Implementation Board and Governing Committee should receive a draft plan by January 2024 for review and feedback." It would then add in place of that language, quote, "The Governing Committee will receive an update on the authority's progress on developing the plan during a governance committee meeting held during the first quarter of 2024. So substantively would change from explicitly saying January to changing it to the first quarter instead. And this is all part of one amendment, but there would also be an additional amendment to strike, or additional part of this amendment to strike from Section 4 the 19th day of October and add in its place 6th day of November. And on the chair signing line, strike Bruce Harrell and add Dow Constantine to the signing line. So that is the substance of the amendments for the consideration of the board.
Okay, Lamont Green.
Thank you. Councilmember Lewis, does this align with any work plans that will be submitted to the implementation board? So how does coordination and alignment happen with the implementation board?
The vision here in the resolution would be that the operational work plan that is submitted would be shared with both boards under the current structure of the authority.
Thank you.
Thank you. Board Member Lewis, would you like to place your amendment before the committee?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. I move the First Amendment to the resolution.
Which includes both the provisions you described, or the
Yes.
number of provisions you described. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, seconded by Member Burney. Discussion on the amendment. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed say no. The amendment's adopted. Do you have further amendments?
No, Mr. Chair, I have no further amendments.
All right, then we're back to discussion on the resolution as amended. I think it's a resolution. Is there further discussion? Member Burney.
Thank you so much, Chair. I just wanted to thank Member Lewis for putting this forward and working with our staff to finalize it. I appreciate the amendments as well. It's important that we have regular reporting to the GC and for transparency and public confidence and their work. And so I appreciate putting the concrete steps around that. And thanks again for working with all of our staff on that.
All right. Further discussion. And everybody can put their hands down now. Oh, thank you. Okay, anybody else? Then the vote is on resolution 2023-04, I believe is amended. And I think we can go ahead and have a simple voice vote. All those in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
And those opposed say no. The resolution is adopted. We now have another item, resolution 2023-11, which is brought to us by Member Lisa Herbold. And Member Herbold, if you'd like to place that before us and then describe it for the group. And I believe that Member Burney has an amendment.
Indeed. Thank you so much. I'd like to move resolution 2023-11, the welcoming resolution.
Is there a second?
Second.
It's been seconded by Member Burney. Member Herbold, please go ahead.
Thanks so much. Today I'm bringing forward this resolution that creates a welcoming policy for LGBTQIA clients of the King County Regional Housing Authority and its contract providers. This resolution was drafted in collaboration with the King County RHA, and just want to thank staff from my office, Elizabeth Cavillo-Duenas, Christina Kutsubos, Council Central staff, Jen Lebrecht, and King County RHA staff, Austin Christopherson, M. Ishiki, and Alan Gutierrez. Our office held a couple of listening sessions. Those listening sessions were facilitated by M, where community stakeholders were able to provide their feedback. The community stakeholders that participated included members of the Gender Justice League, POCAN, Utopia WA, Queer the Land, Trans Women of Color Solidarity Network, New Horizons, and more. We incorporated the input that we received from community members and just really appreciate that they took time to participate in these listening sessions. As for the background on the policy itself, in 2016, the Seattle LGBTQ Commission made recommendations to the City of Seattle, which led to the Human Services Department, the City of Seattle, contracting with Seattle's Ingersoll Gender Center. They issued a report that made recommendations, named the fact that in Seattle, transgender women of color are profiled as predatory and fraudulent in how they present their gender identity when they are accessing shelter services or when trying to access housing. This really sort of underscored another study that was a national study in 2015 by the National Center for Transgender Equity that also found these same experiences, particularly among transgender women of color, when trying to access services that serve people living unsheltered. I worked with a former LGBTQ commissioner and advocate who had worked on policies like this in other jurisdictions. We know that other jurisdictions throughout the country have similar types of policies for LGBTQ plus clients. Some of those jurisdictions include New York City, the state of Massachusetts, some cities in Arizona. For what the resolution does, it broadly establishes standards of inclusivity and requirements for equal access to gender affirming facilities, programs, and services. It includes a commitment by the King County RHA to ensure accountability and compliance. And the resolution lays the groundwork for further work by including descriptions of some of the next steps that King County RHA will be taking to support the implementation of the welcoming resolution. Following this resolution, King County RHA has offered, after its hopeful passage, to take some steps to support the implementation, such as creating an implementation plan to effectuate the requirements outlined in the resolution. This is a body of work that, as mentioned, I started in 2018. Got some good recommendations from Ingersoll that we had intended to focus on a similar approach to the Human Services Department, but in the interim, the homelessness services for the Seattle Human Services Department was transferred over to King County RHA. So really excited to get this one done in my last remaining weeks here, and would welcome any questions that you might have. And there is an amendment.
Okay, well, first off, are there questions for the sponsor? Lamont, your hand's up. Is that from the last time?
Yeah, my apologies.
Okay. Others? Roosevelt.
Yes, I would just like to mention to Council Member Herbold, just thumbs up for just bringing this back. We needed just language, and I'm just glad that it's back, and I'm impressed. And thank you so much, Lisa.
Further questions or comments? I will then turn to Member Bernie, who has an amendment, which I understand to be friendly, but we'll find out. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you so much, Chair. I would like to move amendment number 1 to resolution 2023-11, welcoming resolution.
Second.
That's been moved by Bernie and seconded by Herbold. Member Bernie, go ahead.
Thank you so much. There is one technical correction and then also addition of some language. So on line 6, strike KCHRA and replace it with KCRHA, getting the letters, the acronym correct. And then on page 4, section 2, CA, on line 12, strike harassment can also include repeated and or intentionally misgendering clients, and replace with harassment can also include repeatedly and or intentionally misgendering clients, including using a name that is not the client's preferred name. And so the effect is to first make a technical correction, and then the second change corrects a typo and makes it clear that misgendering can include intentionally not using a client's preferred name. And so I would like to offer this amendment. I sent, thank you, Member Herbold. I sent your resolution to a nonprofit leader on the east side of our county, and they took a look at it and added this. They appreciated so much the language that you put, and then added this in as an addition. So I hope that the board will, or the committee will, accept this amendment.
All right. Board Member Herbold, once again, I understood this to be a friendly amendment. Is that correct? Do you accept this as an amendment to your legislation?
Absolutely friendly, and strengthens the intent.
Unless any member would like to vote separately on the amendment, we'll consider the underlying legislation amended. All right, and I see 2 hands up. Did Board Member McWhorter or Green wish to speak to this? Speak further to this? No? Okay.
No, my fault. My apologies.
So you have before you resolution 2023-11 as amended. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor say aye.
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 Those opposed say no. By your vote, resolution 2023-11 as amended is adopted. We now have a briefing, and it's our last item of business today. It's a briefing on updates to the coordinated entry program from the Regional Homeless Authority's Program Performance Manager. Alex, you have the floor. Please go ahead.
Thank you, Board Chair, and thank you, board members, for taking the time to hear an update on coordinated entry. I want to make a quick amendment to something that I noticed in your materials. It's described in your materials as coordinated entry program. I want to be clear with everyone that in fact it is a coordinated entry system, and that distinction might seem small, but I think it's really critical when we think about the homeless response system, particularly from the perspective of the person trying to engage the system and get to housing. The coordinated entry system is synonymous with those activities, and the mechanics that the coordinated entry system is responsible for executing effectively are really about bringing together multiple different stakeholders and programs into a functioning system. And that distinction, I think, is really crucial. Staff member Christofferson, thank you for sharing the slides. You can proceed to the next slide, please. So I want to talk about coordinated entry as it relates to opportunities for improvement of the system. First, we're going to talk about access to coordinated entry housing referrals. Next slide, please. We had previously, for a number of years, 7 years to be specific, operated a priority pool, which is essentially a subset of people experiencing homelessness, individuals, single adults, young adults, and families that were eligible for housing, and were given the opportunity to pass through coordinated entry to the housing that is connected to the continuum of care. What we have shifted this summer is we've expanded access to those resources for anyone experiencing homelessness in our community. So we no longer operate this small subset of prioritized households as we previously did, known as the priority pool. And what we have, the logic behind changing that were primarily the fact that when we try to prioritize a subset of people experiencing homelessness, they may or may not have been connected to providers in the community. We dispatch navigators to try and find them. As I'm sure many of you know, that activity in and of itself can be time consuming and resource intensive. What we also heard from providers perennially over those 7 years is that they had people, they had families, they had individuals that they had been serving for a significant amount of time. They had built rapport, they'd gotten to know them, they had learned what their preferences and needs are, and had worked to get them document ready for housing, and they had not been granted access to housing through this previous process. So we've expanded that for all households experiencing homelessness in the community. Next slide, please. And what we've really done with this process is we've learned from our experience with the emergency housing vouchers. As a quick reminder, in late 2021, HUD released an opportunity for choice vouchers, essentially, that were expected to partner, the public housing agencies were expected to partner with the COC lead to connect people experiencing homelessness to these particular vouchers. Our community received an allocation of these vouchers. We worked closely with Seattle Housing Authority, King County Housing Authority, and Renton Housing Authority to be able to develop a process by which households experiencing homelessness could get access to these vouchers. Part of that process was developed through something known as reverse matching, which is something that we've learned from other communities in the country, to say that a provider that's serving a household currently can path them to the resource if they're also committing to being able to support the efforts of navigation. And what I mean by navigation critically is being able to demystify sometimes interlocking systems that are not very clear and require a certain familiarity with these bureaucracies in order to successfully get to housing. The administrative activities associated with connecting someone to housing that may occur in a database or via communication such as email are not actually getting someone housed. And I think that's another critical distinction to make here when we talk about coordinated entry. It is the support of someone that is familiar and has access to resources in order to make sure that someone is collecting documentation, is making appointments, is following up on various tasks, and then finally getting housed. That's really critical here. So we have learned from the emergency housing voucher work, which we did, and as I'm sure you all know, was very successful. We had a very successful program comparatively to other comparable size COCs in our country. Next slide, please. Some sticking points that we've observed with this new process. Some of these are familiar. Some of them are a little emergent. First is chronic homelessness documentation. To refresh the board's memory, chronic homelessness is an eligibility criteria that HUD employs, particularly with permanent supportive housing, by which someone has to either be experiencing homelessness for the last 12 continuous months or have 4 distinct episodes in the last 3 years separated by 7-day breaks. That second part, 4 episodes in 3 years, can be challenging to document. In addition to the homelessness history, chronic homelessness eligibility includes disability verification. So what we've rediscovered, or been reminded rather, is that a lot of our colleagues in direct service agencies have challenges documenting chronic homelessness, particularly when you're talking about episodic chronic homelessness. And this is something that is an opportunity to be able to provide the training as far as the familiarity with opportunities to be creative when documenting that chronic homelessness in a way that still aligns with the directives from HUD and partners well with our housing provider organizations. The other piece that I want to highlight for you all, particularly when it comes to our communities, resources for people experiencing homelessness, we have, if you will, for a minute, a bit of spectrum between different intensity of services and duration of services. On the lower end of that spectrum, we have things like diversion or problem solving, depending on what community you're talking about it in, and rapid rehousing. And as a reminder, rapid rehousing is that short-term case management, financial assistance that can go up to 24 months. And on the very far end, you have things like permanent supportive housing. You have a durable project-based voucher from a public housing agency. You have on-site support, behavioral health support. You have a variety of different intensive services and wraparound case management services. What I want to highlight for you all as a board is that in that middle area, there is a bit of a valley, and that is resources that have a durable subsidy of some type, whether it's shallow, whether it's a voucher, but it is it's a subsidy that continues and is not time limited, and short-term supports to be able to get someone to stabilize into housing. We're essentially responsible for rehousing our community members that have fallen into this crisis. And the nice thing about the emergency housing vouchers is they allowed us to fill that gap, at least temporarily, with those durable subsidies, with short-term assistance that lasted up to a year of housing retention services. And then if people needed additional supports, they knew that they could come back to the provider agencies that they previously connected with to be able to get that support. But critically, I want to highlight for you all that there is a gap here in our community, which I don't think is necessarily unique to this community, but it is something that it comes up again and again, and we see it very often at the administration level of coordinated entry. Finally, there is a lot of opportunity to educate our colleagues, not just on the documentation of chronic homelessness, but around the HUD-defined project types when it comes to housing and how those project types map to the portfolio of housing resources in our community. Our community, I think like most communities in the nation, have programs that are idiosyncratic that have developed over time as different resources and funding opportunities have been presented. And as a result, there's some nuances to being able to understand precisely what the program excels at and what the program is less successful at doing, and being able to educate our colleagues in the direct service field to be able to provide them that information, not just at the category level from HUD. For instance, what is permanent supportive housing? Who is it designed to serve? What is it precisely that we're trying to resolve with that resource, but also how those project types map to the resources in our community. So that's something that we're going to be developing. Next slide, please. That's something that we're going to be developing when it comes to providing onboarding training for our colleagues that are new to the work or returning to the work, as well as being able to provide training for our colleagues that are working to support folks through navigation into housing. We want to be able to make sure that people, the housing service providers in our community, have the tools that they need in order to be able to not just understand the fundamentals of the resources, but also are able to provide the documentation needed for the housing providers in our community that are responsible for making sure their units are filled, and also are understanding what an appropriate service match is for those resources. And essentially that means being a good steward of the resources that we're responsible for, making sure that we're not oversaturating supports or under supporting people as they move into housing again. And the other piece, bullet point 3, is being able to collect qualitative information when it comes to unsuccessful referrals. And a good portion of emphasis on our community's coordinated entry system is the efficacy of housing referrals, particularly when it comes to unsuccessful housing referrals. And those can happen for a number of different reasons. But there are instances where there is a dissonance in narrative from the two parties, those two parties being either the household experiencing homelessness or the navigator responsible for supporting that household and the receiving housing provider. That dissonance illustrates something that I think at an aggregate level can be valuable for evaluation and for improvement to the coordinated entry system and the larger homeless response system as a whole, where we're moving to collect that qualitative information in the Homeless Management Information System, HMIS. And we're hoping by next year, we'll be able to have a solid enough a body of data that can be used for evaluation purposes. That is actually, next slide, please. Thank you. We are also working on an update to our prioritization. As a reminder for folks, we had used a COVID-based prioritization since October 2020. That was done in partnership with King County Department of Community and Human Services, Washington State Commerce, Medicaid, as well as Seattle King County Public Health Homeless Healthcare for the Homeless Network. That data sharing agreement was based off of the declaration of emergency related to the pandemic. It has since expired. That means that we have lost access to that integrated data hub that is held by King County. As a result, we're exploring other options based off of data that we can use in HMIS. And this is really in contrast to what had previously been done with prioritization, which is an assessment that was invasive, to be frank with you all, potentially based off of white dominant culture and re-traumatizing for the recipients of that assessment. The COVID prioritization methodology depended on administrative data, that is data that is already collected for other purposes, which did not require the people experiencing homelessness in a perpetual state of crisis to answer a litany or a battery of invasive questions related to their qualifications, frankly, for prioritization. I highly endorse the use of administrative data. Nothing is perfect, but with COVID-based prioritization, we were able to integrate race and ethnicity as a specific factor when it came to prioritization in combination with other risk factors. And to the best of my knowledge, we were the first continuum of care in the nation to do so. We were able to integrate healthcare data, and that isn't just by self-report, but by data collected for the purposes of administering the healthcare. We were later able to provide an update to include gender identity and behavioral health risk factors, as well as age and pregnancy status. These are obviously protected classes, but in combination and with partnership with various organizations, we were able to successfully implement that, again, because of the pandemic. I think that there is, if I were to leave you all with a goal, in an ideal state, we're able to integrate those measures of equity explicitly rather than by proxy. Proxies are very comfortable for a lot of people, but they're not equivalent to using the data points that are actually identifying those communities and those experiences that we have already collecting as part of our work and other systems collect as part of their work. So that is something that we're working on updating, and we should have an update by the end of this month for the Coordinated Entry Committee, which is a subcommittee of the Continuum of Care Board. And next slide, please. We also, speaking of the Coordinated Entry Committee, we reformed it recently. The first meeting was last month on the 26th. We're going to be meeting every month at the end of the month. The Coordinated Entry Committee consists of constituents from the service provider, stakeholders, people with lived experience, administrators and funders in various organizations, and is responsible for, among other things, approving prioritization for coordinated entry. And that's the end of my deck. And I apologize for speaking quickly. If y'all have questions, I will try to answer them.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for your presentation. Board Member Green.
Yes, thank you, Alex, for your work. And I know that you've been working in coordinated entry for a while, and just really appreciate your leadership and the county's movement to COVID prioritization, because the old assessment tool didn't properly assess the vulnerabilities of a lot of different racial groups, and it was creating a lot of disparities on who was getting permanent supportive housing. So I just have a few quick questions. The first one, are we still using the COVID prioritization method for our assessment? And then the second, what percentage of external fills happen versus coordinated entry refill referrals? And then do you have any disaggregated data, like on who is getting into permanent supportive housing?
Thank you, Board Member Green. The first question, the coordinated entry system is not using COVID-based prioritization any longer because the data sharing agreement between King County and the State Commerce expired as a result of the cessation of the declaration of emergency. This is my understanding. It essentially was founded on the COVID pandemic, with the pandemic coming to a technical end. That data sharing agreement was no longer valid. I can tell you that external fills ended as a part of this transition that happened in the summer, where we expanded access to the housing resources. At the same time, we aligned with HUD's guidance when it came to external fills. As a reminder for folks, external fills were housing referrals that took place outside of the coordinated entry system after a significant portion of time went by where the CES, the coordinated entry system, wasn't able to refer into the unit. That has ended as per HUD guidance. So all resources are being filled through this process, and the expansion of availability and access was complementary to the closure of external fills. Related to your question about disaggregated data for PSH placements, I don't have that at the ready and wouldn't be able to provide an answer currently.
So just a quick follow-up. So as far as like an assessment tool that we're using, are we currently using any assessment tools to prioritize folks?
We are not using an assessment tool currently. We are tie breaking off of 3 factors in descending order. They are length of time of the current episode of homelessness, survivors fleeing or attempting to flee DV, commercial sexual exploitation, human trafficking, or intimate partner violence, and finally, those that are unsheltered. More often than not, the length of time of the current episode is the thing that everything hinges on, and the longer the length of time of homeless tends to be the most relevant when matching to the resource. We are working, and that's what I was attempting to convey when it came to the prioritization update. We are working on a prioritization methodology that, rather relying on external data that we don't have access to anymore, thanks to the DSA ending, uses the Homeless Management Information System data that has key data points such as race and ethnicity and gender identity and age, of course, to be able to reconstitute a prioritization methodology that is going to bring us back to those equity measures that I think we wanted to get to as an organization, but ending the external dependency that we saw with the previous prioritization methodology. Did that answer your question, Board Member Green?
Yes, and with this current prioritization, have you all disaggregated the data and, looking along equity lines, and how are folks falling when you disaggregate the data in that way?
Board Member Green, I don't have that ready for you today, but that is something that we have partnered with the community impact team inside the RHA to be able to provide an analysis of the performance of the process to date.
And just my major concern is, along with the BX that we noticed that for quite some time that it didn't assess the vulnerability, especially of Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks, and it created huge disparities in who got permanent supportive housing. And from some of the variables that you're sharing today, it looks like it's not going to get at that in the way that COVID prioritization did. But I think a lot of the COVID prioritization things like disability, race, age, and some of those things, I think you can extrapolate from some of the universal data elements. And so it may be something to consider. And I know there are some other COCs that are doing that. They're using the COVID prioritization, and you don't have to have an integrated hub and share with, data with other systems, although that'll be great, but a lot of those data elements we're already capturing already.
Yeah, I concur with you, Board Member Green. And for everyone's awareness, Board Member Green referring to universal data elements in HMIS are data points that are the essential data captured for a profile in HMIS that includes race and ethnicity, gender identity, age, veteran status, and others that I'm not able to recall off the top of my head. So your point is well taken, Board Member Green. In fact, that is the type of thinking that I think is aligned with our planning currently, and also the feedback that we've heard from the community to date. But I agree that COVID prioritization was really critical, particularly when it came to a significant improvement in racial equity for those that were prioritized to housing, and that's something that I would very much like to see in future versions of prioritization.
Thank you. And the next time you come, if you can share some disaggregated data too, because I think we have to look at that really carefully when we're implementing things so that we don't kind of go backwards with the racial equity. So, thank you.
Yeah, of course, Board Member Green. I regret to inform you, this is likely going to be my first and last presentation to this board. So I would imagine that that information would be available and be presented by another staff member from the RHA.
Thank you, Alex. And again, thank you for your leadership over the years too. I really appreciate you.
Thank you. Member Bernie.
Thank you so much. And I want to say thank you, Alex, to you and the team for all of this. I've heard from my staff that our outreach staff is having great success with placing clients into housing under this revised coordinated entry process. I know that this was one of the issues that came up when this organization was first created. And so I really appreciate that some progress is being made on that and that it's being noticed. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Bernie, for that feedback.
Are there additional questions or comments? Well, hearing none, Alex, thank you so very much for your presentation today. Obviously, board or the committee really appreciates it, and lots of interesting questions and dialogue as well. And although you may not be back for presentation, we'll look forward to following up on what you've told us today. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Board.
That brings us to the end of our agenda for the day. Our next regular meeting is scheduled for December 21st. I will be on the edge of my seat to see if we can get a quorum on December 21st. But in the meantime, is there any further business to come before the committee? Well, hearing none, and with my thanks, we are adjourned. Thanks so much.